Welcome to our roving podcast.
Yeah, so this one, I am out and about.
You're out of the studio, reporting from.
It's an outside broadcast. You want to know my actual? It's Swakeleys Road, as I see the sign go past.
Right.
No, it's near the A40. We're based on the outskirts of London, London Village.
Oh, London.
And I'm driving towards my place of work. So in a previous podcast, you may have heard me rambling or ranting about, these commitments we have as a work commitment. I work at a university, and therefore I have some degree of autonomy, I like to think. Yet there's also a sense of places where I should be at certain times and do certain things. So I'm on my way. I decided to go with the flow, as it were, and go where I'm being drawn to, where I need to be. Yet we've discovered at least, if people can hear this, I can do it from the car, and I can ramble, and I have Louie doing the same thing. So that's where we are. So no, particularly exciting. It's a very, very foggy, misty day. It's not as if I'm reporting from the Golden Gate Bridge or looking up at the Eiffel Tower, maybe one day. This was just a check to see whether or not this would work audio-wise. So, Louie, happy to be guided by you about what you would like us to talk about. I
mean, I'm happy to talk about. Should we just draw a line under some of the idea about how we're going to deal with offensive issues in the podcast? Because from my perspective, I think that some people are going to find everything we're talking about offensive. I mean, I've had hate mail from my blog saying, how dare you even talk about any of these things? You're just going to make people kill themselves. And I don't believe that my blog or talking about this stuff is ipso facto going to make you want to kill yourself. But definitely, I think if you're listening to anything that we're saying, I think you have to be prepared that. I mean, especially me with less, I'm less. I censor myself.
Less what? Sorry.
Well, I censor myself a lot less. So
yes. I recognise I do censor myself.
I am not going to be trying to politically censor what I'm saying to you. If you understand what I'm saying, if you agree with what I'm saying, that's not really why I'm saying it. You might say, well, Louie, communication is about, conveying an idea. Why not just talk in your head to yourself if you don't really care about how other people interpret it? But, I hope that, if we're talking about nature, for example, in the last podcast, I was talking about baboon reproductive strategy. And I put it in a way that perhaps was slightly might be offensive to some people.
Well, what again? And we had a chat about it afterwards. I think it was probably, I'm going to say off air.
It was kind of off air.
Probably we're recording, but it's not something on the podcast. So we do have a recording of more of a conversation of this nature, where we are saying, okay, what's kind of okay to talk about, what's not okay, and much of topic-wise. I think my sensitivity came up is how we talk about it. And so we do have more of that discussion. Just people realise that we're not just... But the reason why I liked what you said, not what you were saying, but it's how you said it. Because you were speaking, you didn't censor yourself. You just said the terms that came into your mouth, and that's what you said, the words you used. You didn't, as we often do, and I catch myself fumbling for words, as I think, I want to say that, but that may not be the right way of saying it. We mentioned earlier on in one of the early podcasts about the role of language in terms of evolution. Again, another topic for one of the podcasts is the importance of language, both in terms of how we communicate now, how we communicate ideas, how we share ideas, how we perhaps persuade people to do things or encourage, invite. These are all different words that... So I'm rambling now. So yes, I appreciated you were speaking from the heart about that. And it was me that went, okay, that caught me a little bit, and I need to reflect on it. I'm pleased I at least said something about it, and that has led to a detailed conversation about that.
Well, I mean, if anybody, by all means, if you are listening and you are offended, leave comments on YouTube, and we're interested to hear what you say. I must admit, I'm very, I don't necessarily feel that I'm going to change my presentation.
Nor should you.
And Matt and I, maybe this takes us on to a discussion of Most Haunted. I don't know if we're going to put two topics
of what? Sorry,
of Most Haunted.
Most Haunted.
most on it, because I was saying that, you know, if I were on TV, for example, I wouldn't be saying, you know, fucking this and you know, cunty that. But, you know, the fact of the matter is that I would expect that everybody listening to this is, if you're not of age, you're at least of an adult sensibility. I mean, you know, this is not for
yet at the same time, this is why I'll play the flip card, as it were.
Sure.
At the same time, there will be people who are of a certain age who are interested in these kinds of topics, and a certain language would put them off. I'm just thinking, for example, you hear people on TV say, "Oh, what would I now want to share this podcast with my parents?"
Right.
And I'd be a little bit cautious of saying, "Oh, you know," but topic-wise, these are the kinds of conversations I would, at least in part, have with my dad, or would want to have with my dad, and I would love to be able to say to him, "Oh, listen to these podcasts, Dad. Aren't they really good? They talk about these things." I now go, "Oh, that one. Just be aware there's some language on there that I know that there wouldn't be language that you would use."
I mean,
that's where I just go to, rightly or wrongly.
I mean, I would just say, I mean, it's funny, really, isn't it? Because, you know, you look back at, I mean, we were talking about the 70s the other day, you know, Pan's People, and you look at, I mean, I like 70s comedy, but for example, you know, Fawlty Towers or something like that, they edit them now because they're not politically correct. And yet, for example, you can watch Channel 4 on a Friday evening and they will say the word cunt and fuck. And so it's almost like you were allowed to say certain things back then that's now offensive, and we're saying certain things that are offensive to the generations back then. And I mean, it's kind of a bit of a bizarre situation.
Well, yeah,
really.
yeah, and I'm still going to just try and do what I can to round things out. Say there'll all be people of our generation, people younger than us, that will still have issues with some of those words. Well, and again, I'm just going to say, rightly or wrongly, or sure. they just do.
Well,
and I mean, I'm just sensitive to that if people say, "Oh, if you hadn't said those words, I'd have listened." Well, again, it's a choice. You can choose not to listen. Of course you can. You always get to choose. It's useful to have at least some conversation about it, so that if anybody says that, we go, "Well, look, listen to this stuff. We've talked it through. We've reasoned it through. We're aware of all those issues. In the end, you pays your money. Well, you don't pay your money. You take your choice. You get to choose. You don't have to listen."
I mean, I think part of this, I mean, from my perspective, you know, they call it like the snowflake generations and things, and that people aren't capable of just having anything bad that affects them in terms of negative criticism, or, you know, anything that questions their worldview or anything that pushes them in any way. I mean, I think if you're going to walk out into the world, people are going to disagree with you. People are going to say things they don't want to say. They're going to smell funny. They're going to look funny. And if you're constantly crying about that, then boy, I suggest you pack up your bags and, you know, head to the nearest cave. The world is varied. People have different ways of expressing things. People have different beliefs. And I mean, I must admit, I just have I don't have any sympathy for that, for you know, tailoring it to such a degree. Of course, if this was a children's program, or as I said at the beginning, or a minute ago, we were talking about Most Haunted. If this were a children's program or a television program, then perhaps I would ensure that all of my responses were, well, I mean,
age appropriate.
I generally speaking do not swear significantly in front of children.
But ironically, if Rachel's listened to this, will think, well, yeah, Matthew does. So I have children, and I do have young children, and I have occasionally, probably more often than I should, sworn in front of them using the F word. And it's usually when I'm speaking from my heart, as in I'm just not really catching myself. And I'm just saying, I think that word does capture an emotion.
However,
something about that word where you go, if you say fucking this and fucking that, it's telling you I'm really meaning it to its point rather than flipping. Doesn't catch it, does it?
I mean, some people think that swearing is related. You know, you have a lack of vocabulary. I mean, the two of us
are fucking tossers.
Well, we're highly educated individuals, and fucking hell, I swear almost every fucking word, because the thing is it's almost like an exclamation point for how passionate we are about this topic. I mean, if I'm not saying fucking, then it's a fucking boring topic, and I'm not talking about it in the first place.
Well, exactly. I think it's an illustration of passion, isn't it? It's something about, well, I'm speaking of something that's close to my heart. It's important to me, and the only way I can really communicate that is by chucking in that word. So I think used appropriately, it has that effect. There are people who do genuinely effort blind every other word, and it's not. It's just kind of no. That's a learned thing. You're not really using it to communicate a point appropriately.
Sure.
In my opinion.
Sure. Well, I agree with that, but I don't think it applies to this this context. And reality is we're dealing with very deep issues, potentially deep issues about the nature of existence, the nature of what it is to be a human being, the nature of the universe, and a couple of swear words here and there, or descriptions of things in perhaps less sanitized words. Well, it's going to happen on my part anyway.
Yeah, and it comes back to one of the early conversations. I think you're editing this up, Lewis. You'll know which one it ends up being in, but I think it'll be in a previous podcast where I'm saying that how we decide what to do with each day, and whereas many of us go down the route of, well, you get a job, even if you don't really enjoy it, you've got to do it. You give way to any sense of things you would like to do, things you would love to do, and therefore anything you feel passionate about. And to me, it captures this idea of, speaking from the heart, or to use a Bill Hicks line, playing from the heart, or to use the actual phrase he would say, play from your fucking heart. That communicates this idea that, what's really important to you, what you're passionate about. And by speaking in that way, we're often swearing because you're so passionate about it, is indicative of the fact you have it. And that's good. We get emotional about stuff. It's good to be emotional. It's not about hiding your emotions to pretend that things are okay if they're not.
Well,
or to pretend they're all, pretend, do you know what I mean? It's actually speaking from the heart.
Well, this podcast is not about watching paint dry. I mean,
some people have.
We're not about sending you to sleep. I mean, if you're insomniacs, if you're hoping to be sent to sleep with some of our, the dulcet tones of Smith and Savva.
Savva and Smith.
Hopefully, I'm kind of hoping that you're interested in this. That it's interesting to think about the nature of existence and these questions, and so that's why we're talking about it. That's why I'm talking about it.
Absolutely,
and not painting and other things.
Indeed. Does that sound like a pause for now? So we talked again about the whole offensive thing. We've again mentioned Most Haunted.
We did,
in the context of what would be appropriate to say on TV. Perhaps next time we speak, whether it appears in the next podcast or whether we hold it for later on, I don't know, depends how appropriate it is. I think it's appropriate to say a little bit about it, because there'll be some people saying, well, they mentioned Most Haunted. What on earth is that? Why are they mentioning it? Why is it relevant here? Perhaps you can pick it up in the next one.
Sure. Sounds good to me.
So on that note, we'll say bye-bye.
Bye.